The story of Lily and Jack Sullivan has become more than a missing children case. It's a knot of conflicting memories, family strain, and a media storm that both helps and hurts. If you want to keep pressure on this case and help push for answers, hit subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any update. Every view, every tip matters. Below is a careful, human account built around the main points you gave, expanded with context and plain language explanation so the timeline, the tensions, and the stakes are easier to follow. Read closely. If anything here rings true or reminds you of a detail, contact the official tip lines. Your small memory may be the link investigators need. Lily and Jack vanished from a small Nova Scotia community, and what made their disappearance different from many other missing child cases was not the size of the search at first, but the lack of a single clear witness. In a place where people notice small changes, a car that's not usually parked on the street, a child out of routine, a neighbor leaving at an odd hour, you'd expect at least one consistent account that helps form a timeline. Instead, investigators and the public were left juggling multiple, sometimes contradictory recollections. One neighbor says a car was seen near the property before dawn. Another insists she heard a dog bark and then silence. Yet a third remembers seeing a small figure run by a lane at an uncertain hour. The human brain is fallible. When people describe fleeting morning events, details slide and blur. Memory under stress reshapes itself. But that explanation alone doesn't fully account for the gaps. Some people who might have known something have been reluctant to come forward. Others may not have recognized the significance of what they saw until much later. That lack of a unified account forced investigators into a difficult position. In urgent searches, police need anchors, confirmed sightings, time-stamped footage, physical evidence. When these anchors are missing, mapping who is where and when becomes a careful exercise in reconstructing habits, school runs, morning routines, who typically check the yard, and stitching them together with any hard data available like phone records, trail camera timestamps, and dashcam footage from passing vehicles. In rural areas, coverage is patchy and cameras fewer. That amplifies the weight of human testimony. So when testimony contradicts itself, it slows everything down. For the community, the absence of a coherent picture feeds unease. People begin to ask whether the missing children slipped away unnoticed or someone close knows more than they have said. That is a heavy suspicion for any small town to bear because it turns neighbors into possible informants or suspects and erodes the sense of ordinary safety. It's also worth noting that small-town dynamics shape what people are willing to say publicly. Close social ties mean long histories of favors, grievances, and alliances. Naming a neighbor to the police is not just an act of reporting, it's a social rupture. People weigh consequences. Will I be dragged into a legal process? Will I be ostracized before they speak? That calculus can lead to silence or partial accounts. In sum, the muddled witness picture in this case is both a product of the imperfect human memory and the social realities of a tightly knit place where people protect one another in ways that sometimes conflict with public investigations. Early unity in search efforts looked promising, but did not last long. The first days after the children were reported missing were full of neighborly energy. Volunteers organized grid searches, walked lanes, checked waterways, and shared updates on local social pages. Candlelight vigils drew families together. People who rarely left their homes joined volunteers patrolling the woods. For a short while, the town seemed united by common purpose. But as days went by, that unity eroded into suspicion and rumor, and people started to ask whether law enforcement's public posture favored calm over speed. That shift happened for several reasons. Citizens often want two things at once in a crisis: clear action and careful procedure. Police sometimes have to choose one over the other. Officers may hold back certain investigative details to avoid tipping off potential suspects or to protect sensitive lines of inquiry. In a small town where word spreads fast, tactical silence can look like inaction. Neighbors saw heavy boots and measured statements rather than the immediate, visible blitz they wanted. That perceived absence of urgency can seed distrust. Some began to suspect authorities were managing optics rather than chasing every possible lead at top speed. Others felt reassured by the measured approach, trusting that the professionals were pursuing a strategy that would not be derailed by premature disclosure. Rumors fill the gap when official communications are sparse. In our era of social media, those rumors spread quickly. A whispered sighting becomes a post becomes a viral claim, and suddenly multiple versions of events swirl online. People blamed the RCMP for delays in reviewing footage or for not conducting certain searches early on. Whether such criticisms are fair depends on the facts behind operational decisions. Warrants, resource allocation, and legal thresholds can legitimately slow certain actions. But from a human point of view, when your children are missing, anything that looks like delay hurts. And so the early, promising unity in search dissolved into finger-pointing, suspicion of motives, and a hardening of attitudes toward law enforcement that would complicate cooperation later on. Into that mistrustful, rumor-filled space stepped an influencer whose arrival changed the story's scale and tone. Influencers bring reach. Every video, every live stream, pushes a local problem into national or international feeds. That sudden spotlight can be a godsend in missing person cases. More people watch, more dashcam owners review footage, and tips can pour in from unexpected places. In this case, the influencer documented searches, interviewed locals, and shared scenes from the wooden bridge and other locations that had come under suspicion. Their videos attracted tens of thousands of views, and messages from distant viewers urged anyone with a hint to come forward. That surge of attention did surface some new tips. People who had been reluctant to speak publicly saw others raising the issue and reached out. But influencer involvement also brought downsides. Online creators often operate under a need to produce content quickly and dramatically. That imperative can clash with investigative caution. Live streams that speculated about motives, or that named people before evidence was secured, risked contaminating witness testimony or endangering privacy. The influencer's footage sometimes went viral accompanied by commentary that amplified unverified claims. Where police needed focused leads and carefully corroborated tips, the social media feed offered a noisy river of speculation. That noise forced investigators to sift an even larger volume of unverified claims, stretching resources and diverting attention from the most credible leads. Meanwhile, locals had mixed feelings. Some appreciated the renewed attention and the new tips it generated. Others resented what they saw as exploitation of the family's pain. Tensions came to a head when the children's grandfather publicly accused the influencer of exploiting the tragedy. For a grieving family member, the presence of cameras, live reactions, and online debate can feel like a second wound. The grandfather spoke for many. Live streamers profiting from grief, sensationalized titles, and unfounded conjecture are morally offensive. His accusation reflected a very human protective instinct. At the same time, his public denunciation added fuel to a community split. Those who defended the influencer as bringing urgent attention saw the grandfather's reaction as an attempt to silence wider scrutiny. Those who sided with the grandfather viewed the influencer as a harmful outsider whose actions risked compromising the investigation and the family's privacy. The public dynamic shifted. Family members' emotions became part of the debate, and personal grievances got tangled with investigative priorities. The influencer's presence also reignited older theories and intensified community divisions. People who had kept certain suspicions to themselves now felt empowered to voice them. Others felt betrayed by what they saw as a rush to judgment. The influencer's coverage amplified fringe ideas and gave them oxygen. Some viewers latched onto inconsistencies in interviews as proof of wrongdoing. Others dismissed those concerns as inevitable in the fog of grief. Net result: more arguments, more leaks to social feeds, and a community less able to hold a single narrative. This fragmentation makes it harder for investigators to separate genuine, actionable information from drama manufactured for clicks. A wooden bridge in the area became a renewed focus because bridges and natural choke points often serve as locations where evidence accumulates. They connect lanes, mark transition points between different terrain, and can be a place where someone might pause or pull a vehicle partially off the road. The influencer filmed the bridge, sparked conversation about what might have happened there, and that renewed focus prompted fresh searches. Canine units returned to scan the banks, dive teams checked culverts, and volunteers cleared undergrowth. Those efforts yielded no public breakthroughs, but they demonstrate how targeted attention can redirect manpower. The bridge became a symbol. For some, a place of hope where the right tip might break the case. For others, a magnet for conjecture and a stage for speculative narratives. Public attention did generate tips, some useful, some false, and that's a core paradox. On one hand, broad interest can uncover overlooked footage or coax a witness out of silence. On the other, it generates false leads that waste time. Police have to follow up on each tip to maintain credibility. When thousands of people weigh in, the workload balloons. For grieving families, each false lead can be traumatic. The community felt both the benefit and the harm. New eyes combed earlier search zones and sometimes spotted things previously missed, but the signal-to-noise ratio dropped precipitously. Investigators had to triage leads rigorously, sometimes frustrating citizens who wanted immediate action on every new post. The town split into camps, those who supported influencer involvement and those who opposed it. Supporters argued that in a case where early momentum and attention had flagged, any force that kept the story visible was welcome. They pointed to cold cases that reopened after social media pressure brought forward tips decades later. Opponents argued that the influencer's style was performative, risked contaminating evidence, and was emotionally harmful to the family. The split went beyond personalities. It aligned with deeper differences about privacy, the role of outside media, and whether external pressure helps or harms delicate investigations. Division also made community coordination harder. Some volunteers refused to work under the influencer's banner, while others joined. A worrying outcome of the whole dynamic is that the case shifted from being solely about two missing children to becoming a battle over narrative and control. When energy pours into arguing about who tells the story, resources and focus can be diluted. The primary objective, finding Lily and Jack, requires coordinated searches, careful evidence handling, and sustained, disciplined follow-up. Media spectacles and online controversies can at times interfere with that work by changing the incentives for witnesses and volunteers. Investigators must then walk a fine line, engage public interest enough to draw tips, but manage the narrative so that speculation does not derail the search for verifiable facts. Underpinning all of this is a painful belief among many. Someone in or near the community probably knows more than they're saying. That suspicion is part truth, part yearning. In small places, people notice tiny changes. A neighbor leaving at odd hours, a seldom seen relative visiting, a car parked on an unfamiliar lane. Those observations, if shared with police, often become the clues that rewarm a cold trail. But social pressures, fear of retaliation, loyalty to family, anxiety about being ostracized, can keep people silent. Breaking that silence usually requires trust that reports will be handled sensitively, that informants will be protected, and that police will act without turning private lives into public spectacle. Right now, that trust is fragile. From this tangled story comes several clear takeaways. Public attention can be a force for good when it generates credible tips. It can also harm investigations when it spreads misinformation and distracts authorities. Family members' public reactions reveal more than emotion. They sometimes point to fracture lines that investigators should understand, not amplify. Media narratives and online commentary can overshadow the painstaking work of searching, interviewing, and testing evidence, work that is slow and often invisible. Physical evidence locations, like the wooden bridge, can be crucial anchors, but when they become symbolic stages for speculation, they risk turning search resources into theatrical props. Above all, the simplest truth remains. Someone close to this story likely knows more than they have publicly shared, and breaking that silence is the most urgent step toward answers. The case of Lily and Jack Sullivan is still active and unresolved. If you have any information, even something you dismissed as insignificant at the time, please contact the official tip lines. Check any dashcam, doorbell footage, or phone videos for the days around the disappearance. Encourage anyone with knowledge to speak with investigators. You can submit anonymous tips if you prefer. Finally, if you want to help keep this case in the public eye and hold authorities accountable for thorough work, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you're alerted to every verified update. This is a community effort. Persistence, careful sharing of verified facts, and the courage for one voice to break the silence are what will ultimately create the chances of finding Lily and Jack. Don't let their names fade. Keep watching, keep sharing, and keep speaking up.